Alright, back again with another demonstration showing another older flash card working on the N3DS, or 3DS, doesn't really matter which actually. As before, I made some older flash cards like the original R4, the Top Toy DS, or the STT as some people refer to it as. We used something called Stage 2 launchers to boot them to get around TWL Firm's initial block, because a lot of the older flash cards that don't work with my Slot 1 launcher, this is like the first one I made. This basically just gets around the home menu's DS cart whitelist check, which still occurs outside of TWL Firm, so that hasn't been patched yet. Oddly, if you have the CFW that supports changing unit info setting and boot it, making it look like a dev console, it won't check the DS cart whitelist anymore, and it'll boot anything you give it. But that's not practical for the end user because that breaks eShop access, obviously. So, older flash cards use an ARM7 entry address that doesn't work with TWL Firm. I'm not sure if it's just standard memory protection regions or if this is intentional to block older flash cards. But a lot of homebrew SRLs and the SRLs but on the internal ROMs of the older flash cards use ARM7 RAM address and entry addresses that the TWL Firm does not like. So, but I'm going to show this card working, the DS Extreme. Some of you might remember this. This came out like about a year after the R4, the original R4. This particular model is 2 GB capacity, internal NAND, I guess is what you would call it. It's unique in that it doesn't have a micro SD slot at all. It has internal storage and you connect it to a PC via USB port. It also has 2 LEDs on the back, one here and one here. You can barely see it because my camera's calibrated for the 3DS and not the scene around it. This is the box it came in, kind of nifty. But I'm going to show it working with my Stage 2 launcher here. As you can see, it has those nice little LEDs there. Alright, it actually has its own icon, unlike the older R4, which doesn't have an icon defined at all in its ROM. This one does. The interesting thing about this card is it's not using its own game code, so it actually passes the initial game code check for home menu, that home menu does, so it'll attempt to boot it. As you can see, it won't, because once TWL Firm boots up, you get this little message. But it gets past the initial check on home menu, because if it didn't, it would immediately error out without even trying to reboot. But I'm going to show it working with my Stage 2 launcher now. Because for a while I wasn't sure if it worked or not, so I went ahead and ordered this card. It finally came today. This is basically just a ROM with the ARM7 settings corrected. There you go. I'm going to boot a game. This card is really dated, so I think you have to patch some of the newer games to work on it. I haven't really bothered trying to look that up. I do know the Pokemon games don't work on this. Not in their current form. This thing appears to use this sort of its own little save chip or something, the EEPROM, that it has to take data off and write to NAND as soon as you boot it up next time. Kind of annoying. I'm not sure how it finds these ROMs because there's no menu, there's no folder structures that it browses through. There's a lot to be desired with this browser, but another thing about this card is I was able to init DLDI from an external NAND app. So the original R4 is no longer alone in this quirk, in that I can probably create a Moonshell 2 SRL that has DS Extreme DLDI, and it'll work with this. Let's get at it. Basic. So maybe we can get some interesting things going on with this, as well as the R4. Unfortunately, my initial tests show that it doesn't really like TWL mode at all, or as DSI enhanced mode as people call it. It kind of does a little disco dance with the LEDs. If something tries to access it in TWL mode, it doesn't get along in TWL mode, so I think it's not going to be quite as interesting to use as the R4. But maybe that's just because of the way I've been launching the SRIs. I've been using HP menu for the most part. And maybe what I'm going to try and do is create a copy of this app that runs in TWL mode on its own and see if it works that way. Maybe it's just HP menu, HP homebrew menu getting in the way. But we'll see. But there you go. DS Extreme. Now working on the new 3DS and 3DS models. And the plus side is, unlike the R4, this one doesn't have contact issues with the slot, so I don't have to mess with it to get it to show up. So that's another plus. It is a little hard to insert though, but hey, that just means it's got really good contact.